Welcome back. I'm proud to introduce our next guest as truly one of the greats in the world of rock and roll. Here on Midday, we actually don't do as many interviews, maybe as we should, with rock and roll artists. It's a main part of our society, and I am crazy about rock. This is Mr. Lou Reed. Let me tell you about Lou's background. He has the ability and has demonstrated the ability to combine high artfulness with a street-level content. Was a driving force behind the Velvet Underground in the 1960s and is seen by many music critics as practically inventing new wave music back then. His work has really affected many musicians working today. His album last year, Blue Mask, was picked by top music critics as one of the 10 best albums of 1982. He returns to live performance tonight in New York City at the Bottom Line. Welcome to Midday, Lou.
Hello.
What's your reaction when you hear music critics, people like me who just like music, describe you as practically inventing new wave music back in the 60s with the Velvet Underground?
I wonder if it was true. Yeah, I never thought of that way. Music critics say lots of things. I read someplace that if you believe them when they say something good about you, then you have to believe them when they say something bad.
So you don't...
I don't know if there's any validity to that. If there is, I'm very flattered.
Well, the appeal of the city, the appeal of the streets of New York, the East Village, I mean, it's in your veins. It's part of your musical roots. What was there about life at that, when rock and roll was in this sort of where have all the flowers gone kind of euphoria, and you were doing this real hard-edged, raw city stuff? Why were you doing that kind of stuff back in the 60s that made what you did then so avant-garde and what is seen now as a pioneering thing?
Well, we set out to do that. I mean, we thought about it, and we were from New York, and all that other stuff was going on in the West Coast and San Francisco and
London.
I don't know what was going on in London.
Well, the Beatles.
Oh, we never. I never liked that.
No.
No, I never liked the Beatles. I never really liked any British group. I don't think the British should play rock and roll.
What do you what do you think they should play?
I don't think they should play anything.
Not even. How about the Royal Symphonic Orchestra?
Oh, well,
they just go out and sit down with their instruments.
They're good for that.
Yeah.
They're good for that, and I suppose they should learn how to cook. But I like the Stones. I think they were like the only group. Some are Ray Davies, but I don't want to get into all negative things. It's I never took British rock and roll seriously, and I still don't.
What rock and roll?
It's not like listening to doo-wop or growing up on Motown.
Yeah.
And American groups could do all this great stuff, but there's this Anglophobia that has existed as far back as I can remember. But what we were doing, to go back to the flower child business, was that had no relationship to the reality that we knew. By we, I mean myself and the other people in the Velvet Underground. And we had as a goal to put together rock and roll songs that really had something to do with what was really going on for us in New York and around us, and had some basis in reality as opposed to this junk.
Well, when you think of yourself today, do you think of yourself as you are a singer and you are a writer of music and a writer of lyrics and a really fine songwriter. How much of what you're doing today do you want to be considered as poetry?
Well, my lyrics, I remember a great moment. It was somebody was interviewing Phil Spector. You like this story. And they said, Phil, I think it was Steve Allen, a real pedantic type, saying, there's a lot of pedants running around loose, and for some reason they like to leap into the rock and roll arena point and say that only has one syllable. So he was reading the lyrics out loud to the Do Run Run. And I said, now, Phil Spector, what do you have to say to defend that? And Phil said, give that to me. and he read it again, only this time he kept bashing the table with his hand, keeping beat. He said, that's the way it's supposed to go. My lyrics are not, my lyrics can hold up to being read alone, but they're meant to be set to music.
There was a period of time.
They're written.
They're meant to be set to music.
Right.
There was a period of time in your life after.
They're much better when they're set to music.
You like them better set to music.
Yeah.
But there was a time in your life after.
I write poetry.
You do write poetry.
Yeah. I've had some stuff published, but that's not the thing I like to do best. What I like is a rock and roll lyric.
Yeah.
It's just,
You really love rock and roll. I mean, really, rock and roll is
I
the
don't listen
only
to
kind of
anything
music.
else. I listen to classical music and jazz, and I just went back to rock and roll. You know, for me, that's what I listen to.
When you have come back to a situation like the Bottom Line, which has been such a happy place for you in the East Village, filled with people. I mean, the thing is sold out. Lines are going to be around the block for a standing room. How does the performer, in such a comfortable setting, approach what he wants to do? What do you want it to be tonight at the Bottom Line?
Well, you know that joke about how porcupines make love.
How do they do it?
Carefully. Yeah. I want to have it be as perfect as possible and as loose as possible at the same time. I don't like to rehearse people so that they have it down like James Brown's bands. You know, they've got it absolutely letter perfect.
Choreographed almost.
I like to have a certain amount of room left for mistakes. I don't like to know the song too well. I like it to be just a little loose, like, you know, so it's not coming to you encased in plastic.
How do you want the people in the audience to experience the song? The song.
Well, we're not Frank Sinatra, you know.
No.
I mean, I don't like that music. I don't like those lyrics. I think that stuff is really junk, and it was fine in the 30s and 40s. And if people like saloon singers, they should go to a saloon and hear one. But I like rock and roll songs that you can relate to. In 1983 in New York City.
But the things are stories.
Yeah.
They're stories. You're telling little.
I want everybody to believe the stories are real, and that I'm really the person that it happened to, or that if I'm telling you a story, I'm relating to you secondhand a real, true story.
Something that happened to you or could happen to you.
Even if I made it up, it should come across as though I didn't.
I want to talk about your new album. I just happen to have a copy of it here. This is really new wave music, right? No, there's no album in here. This is the artwork for the cover. First, this is an actual motorcycle helmet that you wear when you're riding a cycle, right?
Yeah, that is my helmet.
That is your helmet.
Yeah.
What?
I never fail to get a kick out of when little kids love that helmet.
When they see you in the...
Yeah, anytime I go someplace, because, you know, I don't leave the helmet on the bike.
No. When you walk in the store with the helmet.
Cradling it, right.
There's a little Darth Vader thing there.
That's what, they have one that looks even more like that. But little kids are always coming up and telling me how much they like my helmet.
Anyway, this album, the new album, which will be coming out in the middle of March, is called Legendary Hearts, following the Blue Mask, which was voted by the critics one of the 10 best of '82. When we come back from this break, I want to talk about what your goals are, what you tried to do with Legendary Hearts.
Great.
Right? We'll be back right after this. With us right now is Lou Reed. Lou Reed opens at the Bottom Line tonight, Friday, Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday, and I believe the gig is totally sold out. This new album, Legendary Hearts, follows a great success in the Blue Mask. What came together for Lou Reed in the Blue Mask that you're hopefully going to be following up with on Legendary Hearts?
The greatest thing that happened on the Blue Mask was that I got involved with a guitar player named Robert Quine.
A former lawyer.
Yes. And we hit it off musically and personally, and that made a real difference because I could try things that I couldn't do with other musicians. There are a lot of people around who can play technically, and that's not what I'm looking for. Looking for people who have a feel and emotion.
You want the emotion to be coming through from all the music.
I'm not interested in technique, and very few people I've been able to play with satisfactorily, and so I would try to write around that. I was trying to write songs that went around that, but my favorite songs have 2-3 chords, and that's it.
Simple songs, simple construction.
As simple as you could get. I mean, you should listen to one of my songs and say, oh, I can do that.
See, somebody who just is learning the guitar could play
any of my songs.
But what about the person who would say, well, basically, that's so simple, it could be described as folk music. It doesn't sound like folk music. It's not played like folk music, but could it be played like? I mean, hypothetically, could you play?
I don't see why if folk music is the music of the folk, the folk are listening to rock and roll, so rock and roll to me is urban folk music, if you want to. You know, it's just titles and stuff like that. 2-3 chords on an electric guitar, not an acoustic guitar, electric instruments. So the thing with the Blue Mask was that I thought about it a lot, and when I had Quine, I knew I had a guitar player where I could play with him, because I hadn't been playing on the albums anymore, because it was very difficult for me to find anybody good enough and interesting enough to play with, so I was writing around it, and just singing it. And then I got the rest of the guys in the band, like Fernando on the bass, Saunders on the bass. He's, you know, he's really something. And it just went off like clockwork. You get the right people, and I worked hard on the material. And with the idea of it being 2 guitars, bass, drum, me playing guitar again.
Basic, simple, straight ahead rock and roll.
Very, very simple. Yeah. Very, very simple. I like things that are very simple. I think rock and roll is fun and it's simple. Not to say that it's simple-minded, you know, but each to their own. But that's the kind of stuff I write and play is the kind of stuff I like to listen to.
You have had in your career a couple of interesting periods of what I call downtime. When the Velvet Underground broke up, you literally went back to Long Island. You were living with your parents, working with your father's firm for a while. And
I was a typist.
You were a typist, right?
Which is very funny, because when I was in high school, my parents said I should take typing just in case. And
they were almost right.
They were almost right, because just in case showed up.
Yeah. You know. So that was, but then you came out of that period and came back and did some really great music. And the last couple of years have been a period of downtime for you. A period when you really have not performed much, and between the Blue Mask and whatever the previous album was, there was a gap of time.
I've been thinking a lot.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to get to. What have you been doing, and how would you describe your powers at this point in your long and interesting roller coaster-like career? Would you say?
Well, it's not a roller coaster. It's been basically a straight line. I'm just starting to scratch the surface of how far I can go with it, what I can accomplish with it, just according to how high I want to aim with it.
Yeah.
I have great ambitions for little 2-3 chord songs with words and a beat, and what you can do with it, and what you could do if you strung a bunch of them together, whether you could make a, you know, I mean, no one's actually done a real rock and roll opera, or no one's really done a rock and roll stage show yet. I mean, they still just play this junk, all this Broadway music with that terrible kind of singing.
You don't like that stuff.
I just think it's so old.
You have a very
and stupid.
limited spectrum in terms of what you really like in music. I mean,
my spectrum is very wide within that.
Within that rock and roll, but I mean, Cole Porter, all that stuff you don't like.
It's very old, and I don't like it.
You have
none of that. I can't, you know, relate to Gossamer Wings and
Trip to the Moon. I love that music.
Yeah. That stuff's fun, but when I want to hear something, I want to hear that beat, and I don't want to hear those. I just am unimpressed by that type of lyric thing. That's Tin Pan Alley carried to the nth degree. You know, Cary Grant is an old Coward or Cole Porter, but that stuff doesn't relate to the real world as I know it. Yeah. You know, that to me is like going to a Walt Disney movie. You know.
Well, you have always been outside the mainstream.
Pre-Tron.
Pre-Tron. Tron changed Walt Disney. You've been outside the mainstream of rock and roll, and very successful outside the mainstream. It would be interesting to hear comments on real commercial success and Lou Reed. Can you combine high art, as you try and do practice it, with great commercial success?
I practice low art.
Low art.
You know, it's going to say how far I can go with low art first, and then mid art. You know, but I don't get the question.
Well, is it possible to write songs for yourself that can be enormously successfully commercially?
Well, I was successful commercially, but it was a fluke.
Was it Sally Can't Dance?
No, Walk on the Wild Side.
Walk on the Wild Side, right.
And people have, for a while since then, had said, why don't you write another Walk on the Wild Side, which I would have if I could have. But the thing is, all the things that go against the chance of a commercial success happen to be in Walk on the Wild Side. I mean, there was no reason that thing should have been a hit, the lyric and the rest of it. But other than that, I haven't had a commercial success, and I don't really know what that entails particularly. I write stuff that I would, if I heard it, I would go out and buy the record myself. Because I like that kind of stuff, and there's not much of that kind of stuff around. I usually have to go into records, some older records, to find some good stuff. I really, you know, I don't want to come off as pretentious and negative, but I really don't like any of that older kind of music, and I don't like most of what's going on right now either. So here I is.
Well, people get a chance to hear your the new album, Legendary Hearts. Blue Mask did really well. I have one fantasy question. People fantasize, people who have been fans of whatever group, and then it breaks up, fantasize that someday the group will be back together again. Is there any possibility
Not even remotely.
that the Velvet Underground would ever, it's just never going to happen?
No, no.
Not for one.
When it dissolved, it dissolved.
Well, what's the best thing that can happen tonight at the bottom line?
But I remember the lyrics.
All right. On that note, we will close. We're going to be back with Victor Hilda Madrid with Report on Chinatown. You have just met one of the rock and roll legends, Mr. Lou Reed. We'll be right back.